Hey everybody, welcome back to You Are What You Love. I am your host, Marissa Tandon, and today my guest is a fellow podcaster, writer, director, and founder of Observer Pictures, Faith McQuinn. Please welcome my new friend to the podcast.
Hello, new friend.
Hello, new friend. I love the podcasting medium because every time we start something, I'm like, oh, we've talked for about 5 minutes and we've known each other on the internet vaguely for like a couple years. We're, I guess, familiar now and we can talk about all of your hopes and dreams in life.
Yeah. I mean, it is the way.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I am excited to have you on. I'm actually a fan of your work, so I'm hyped to hang out a little bit and talk about maybe what got you to the point that you make such great stuff.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
And I love that vampire show, by the way.
Oh, thank
I'm
you
obsessed.
so much. Thank you so much. We are I actually am working on the finale of season 2 right now. So that is a spoiler-free little tease. So, well, what are we talking about today? What is the thing that made you who you are today?
Lost.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I know that is, I don't know, controversial for some people, but literally one of my favorite shows ever.
I don't know if it's controversial. I guess it's highly talked about, hotly debated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think definitely a cultural moment as well.
Oh, for sure.
For people who are listening who have never heard of this television show Lost, can you give us like a spoiler-free, under a minute explanation of what Lost is?
Okay. A bunch of strangers crash land on an island, but this island is definitely more than you think it is. Smoke monsters, weird polar bears, crazy other people who live there. And I think the best part about Lost is that in the first season, early on, they basically said nobody's safe. Like anybody on the show could die. And that was the first time I'd experienced that on primetime television.
Yeah.
Where they were like, yeah, we don't care if you're a main character or not. We might kill you. I thought that was pretty amazing. I'm not going to say cool. That sounds terrible. Oh, we're going to kill characters. That's awesome. But I did think it was great storytelling.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point in terms of like what set Lost apart from other shows. Because now you think about that and you're like, oh, well, so many people have done it. Like Walking Dead did it, Game of Thrones did it. But all of those shows have come post Lost.
Yeah.
So that was really a first, I'm so hesitant to say the first time anyone ever did it, but like breaking a assumption that the viewer is always going to have, which is I'm watching these people, so therefore they're going to survive to the next episode so that I can continue watching them.
Right, yeah. Like the stakes felt more realistic.
Yeah. Do you remember like the first time you saw Lost?
I'm terrible with years, so don't ask me to do that. But I do remember watching the pilot when it aired, because I'm a huge sci-fi fan, have been my whole life, and I come by it by my mother, who's a huge sci-fi fan as well. So I was like, oh, we're going to watch Lost. Lost is going to be great. And then I watched the pilot and I was like, oh, okay, well, I didn't like that. So I didn't watch it. And then I kept hearing all of this hype and all of this amazing stuff. So over the summer, when they were running reruns, I watched the whole first season and then was fully obsessed. And then that was it. They had me.
You had to get to a point where it was bingeable. The first episode did not pull you in enough to bring you back the second week.
Yeah. Which is crazy because, okay, here's the story. If you guys want to know like how much a person loves a show. So my girls, I have twins.
Mm-hmm.
They were born in 2010 and they were born on Super Bowl Sunday.
Oh my goodness.
And I remember being in the hospital thinking, there's a new episode of Lost on Tuesday. Am I still going to be in the hospital? and not really feeling okay asking my doctor. I was like, she's going to think something is wrong with me if I ask if I'm still going to be here on Tuesday. So I could know that the TV has to be on ABC so I can watch Lost.
Oh
and I was like,
goodness.
I just had babies, but whatever. Is Lost going to be on this television?
Whatever, they're sleeping most of the time at that point. They're 4 seconds old. It's okay.
was such a weird thing. I was home though. They let me go home Tuesday morning, so I did watch Lost at home
Released just in time. I
just in
love
time.
that. Wow, twins, that is a handful, I would assume,
Oh,
or 2 handfuls, I
yeah,
suppose.
quite. Yeah, and
Wow.
they are now 13, if that
Ooh,
puts
that's an
any sort of relativity on
yeah.
the amount of time it has been.
That is, wow, 13 is an age as twins. Do you have 2 girls? You have 2
Yeah,
girls, right?
2
Yeah.
girls.
Wow. Are they sci-fi nerds? Have you shared your sci-fi love with them?
Um, I got them addicted to Supernatural. They are on their
Classic.
2nd watch through right now.
Amazing.
So, I did
Of the whole
that.
thing? They've done
Of
all
the whole
15
thing. They've
seasons?
done all 15
My
seasons, and
lord.
now they're back, and they're back to season 6 now. They just started season 6 again.
Oh my goodness.
They're huge anime fans, and I honestly haven't met a 13-year-old who isn't yet, so but yeah, they're not as hardcore as I am, but
Mhm.
I'm getting them there.
Okay. Well, Supernatural is a good gateway drug, I feel.
Oh,
If you can
yeah.
make it all the way through and twice, my goodness. Well, you mentioned that you got your sci-fi love from your mom, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So did you guys share a lot of sci-fi before that, or was it something that, kind of started with Lost, or how did you guys get there?
My mom was a big Trekkie, so
Okay.
watched a lot of Star Trek, um, and then Quantum Leap, which my
Classic.
top 2 television shows of all time are Star Trek: Next Generation and Quantum Leap. So, she was obsessed. We watched it all together, so that was kind of our thing, and, she actually we'll just throw this in there. She's the reason that I got into podcasts because my mom is at an age where she listened to radio shows. And so
Mm.
she got me into X minus one, which is a sci fi radio show. And I listened to X minus one as a podcast. And I was like, oh, wait, this podcast thing is a thing. So I started listening to more podcasts once I found X minus one. So it's my mom's fault.
So, Star Trek: Next Generation and Quantum Leap, I think, are 2 of the most, like, iconic names in sci-fi television to begin with. So you
Yeah.
really started out with the big ones, the big guns.
Oh, yeah. All the
Did
Star
you
Trek movies, everything. Yeah. But Next Generation's my number one.
Number 1. Well, speaking of Star Trek and the Star Trek movies, there is one large common link between Lost and the Star Trek films of most recent.
Ah, yes, Mr. J.J. Abrams. And bad
S
robots.
Yes. So, I'm curious, like, I think, to me, Lost and this might just be my age, but Lost was, like, the first time I heard J.J. Abrams's name and was, like, aware of this being someone who was doing things that was upsetting people.
I love it.
And I think it's so interesting because I actually really like J.J. Abrams' work. I enjoyed we did an episode on Star Trek with a friend of mine from high school who has, sort of had the reverse journey. She watched the Star Trek movies when they came out, the J.J. Abrams ones, and then from there was like, "I need more of this," and went back to the original
Oh,
series.
nice.
And so a lot of people, I think, like original Trekkies looked at the Star Trek movies that J.J. Abrams did, and they were like, "These are not the correct version," and blah blah blah. But I think it's cool because it really did bring my generation in to go and look
Oh, for
back at
sure, for
the
sure.
originals.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So are you I guess it's a long-winded way of asking you how you feel about J.J.
Well,
Abrams.
okay, so Lost isn't my first experience with J.J. Abrams. Felicity was.
Okay.
So I remember him from Felicity, and he had controversy on Felicity because
Okay.
supposedly at some point in time he lied about his age. And
Okay.
said that he was, like, 10 years younger than he was, and it was, like, this whole, like, kid genius creating this show, and then people found out he was actually 10 years older, and it was like, "Oops."
Uh,
So he had controversy on Felicity, and then that season where, Kerry Russell cut her hair, people, like, went insane, like, "Oh, all the curls are gone, it's terrible." So I knew J.J. Abrams from that. So when I heard about Lost and knew he was one of the co-creators, I was like, "Okay, so this dude who made Felicity is now doing sci-fi?
mhm.
How weird." And now it's so strange to say that because I don't think anybody thinks of J.J. Abrams as anything but
But
a
sci-fi for sure.
sci-fi creator. And
Yeah.
so it was really interesting to, like, be like, "Oh, well, okay, I'll check it out." And yeah, so
And then you were like, "This pilot sucks." Did your mom keep watching it after you were like, "There's no way"?
oh, no, because it was funny because she asked me if I'd watched it because by this time I was living in California, so we weren't in the same state anymore, and I
Mhm.
asked if she watched it, and she's like, "I caught it, but I'm not sure how I feel about it," and I was like, "Me too, I don't know." So we both didn't watch it, and she never picked it up again, and
Oh,
I'm
that's
still trying
so
to get her t
interesting.
into it.
It's so interesting because I think sometimes people you don't realize, like, how important a first episode really can be until you come back to a show that the first episode didn't work for you, and then once you get all the way through, like, this will be my controversial take of the episode. That's how I felt about Succession. Like, I watched the first 2 episodes maybe, and I just could not get into it, and I walked away from it, and I was like, "Yeah, I guess, whatever, not for me." And then everybody was talking about it, and I went back and I was like, "Let me just I'm gonna do it." And I got all the way through the end of the first season, and I was like, "That was such a good finale that I'm now obsessed with everything that happened before that wasn't working for me, but it all comes
Oh,
together here."
nice.
Um yeah, and now I love it. I think I truly really think some of the writing and acting is some of the best that's on TV right now, which is not a hot take. It's a take being made by most. But um
Yeah,
but yeah, I think sometimes like we have lost a lot of that feel of the first episode had to be good to bring you back because now so much of television is binging and so much of
yeah,
it is just available immediately.
yeah, and this was, I'm gonna show my age because this is definitely I didn't binge television in
Sure.
2008, like, that wasn't a thing, that was hard, like, I remember the first thing I binged was The West Wing, and I
Mhm.
had to do it, like, old school, like, I had to go to, like, TV Guide and find out when it was gonna be on TNT so I could watch the episodes and catch up, and Lost yeah, and the way I caught up with Lost was reruns during the summer, like, it wasn't just like,
Yeah.
"Hey, let me go get the DVDs or turn on Netflix or something," it just wasn't there, so I
Yeah.
had to find it that way, and I watched it live. Like, we
Mm.
had a TiVo, but it was, like, the one show that I had to sit down and watch, and my husband knew it, he was like, "Okay, no, we don't bother her on Tuesdays from this time to this time because I am watching Lost." And
Was
then
that
for, like, an
a
hour after it, I would be on forums.
Oh my god. Oh, so that's what I was gonna ask, was it like a spoiler thing that you were worried about, like,
Oh,
missing something?
absolutely,
Yeah?
absolutely.
It was that intense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so funny you say I'm gonna show my age, but I think what's wild is that I every once in a while, I, like, think back and I'm like, "Actually, streaming is not that old." Like,
Oh, no.
bingeable content is not that old. It feels that old because, like, I used to do, like, this will make me sound old, and, it is what it is, but it actually is not I think it was, what, 10 years ago that Netflix really started streaming? When did House of Cards start? I think House of Cards was, like,
Oh.
2015.
Yeah, it was definitely in the teens. I don't remember when exactly, but yeah, that was their first major show. I've had Netflix since 1998.
2013.
Yeah.
Okay. So House of Cards was, like, 2013, which I think really, to me, marks, like, the beginning of streaming becoming a big, big
Yeah,
situation with original content.
yeah.
Um, and so, like, anything pre-2013 and even still in 2013 and for a couple of years after that before things really started to take off, I think is not that long ago. It's a decade ago is when
Right,
things
right.
started getting big. Um, but I used to order the DVDs of the box set. Like, we upped our, when I was in high school, I made my dad up our DVD, like, amount limit
Oh,
on
on
Netflix.
Netflix, yes.
'Cause I was like, "You don't understand, like, I can't watch 4 episodes and mail it back and then wait for them
Right,
to send me the next 4. I need to be in a constant rotation."
right, right. Like, I had yeah, I started off with the 3 at a time so that I would be like, "Okay, you
Yeah.
gotta watch that first disc and send it back immediately after you finish it so that you're not you don't have
Yeah,
to
you have to
wait."
send it as soon as, like so you can constantly you have 1 ready to go,
Yeah,
1 you're watching, and one in transit,
yeah,
basically, at all
exactly.
times. Um, so were you in that time period actually so you said you had TiVo, were you, like, recording and rewatching even after, you watched it live, or were you really just diving into, like, a fan conversation afterwards?
Um, Probably around season 3 is when I started recording them and rewatching them because I was looking for things,
Mhm.
but I was in a forum where I didn't have to do that work because a lot of them were doing it already, where they would do screenshots and talk about things and all this. And this couple in Hawaii, Ryan and Jen, had a Lost podcast, and I started listening to them in, I guess, 2009
Mhm.
is when I really got into that, or 2008, the summer of 2008. And basically, even though I have never met them in person, they have been my friends since that
Aw.
started. Like,
Yeah.
that's how Lost happened. Like, their kids are like adults now. They were around before my kids were born. Like, I have been friends with them that long. And then when they stopped their podcast, they introduced another person, and I went to Cliff and Stephanie Ravenscraft's podcast, and that became a whole group of people that I still am friends with. Like, I have probably a dozen or so friends that I have never met in person,
Mhm.
but it was because of Lost that we are
Oh,
friends.
wow.
So it's like, going on 20 years almost
Yeah.
that I've been friends with people that I have not actually met in person. And it's like wild.
That's amazing. Yeah, I feel like, Lost really had this, like, cultural icon moment in some
Mhm.
ways. I don't know if it was there already at season 1 or if it took a couple seasons to develop, but I specifically remember Weezer releasing an album with one of the
Oh, with
actors on the
Hurley.
cover.
Yes,
Yeah,
Hurley's on the
Hurley.
cover of the Hurley cover, yes.
Yeah, and it was like, everyone was like, "Hello?" But then most people were like, "Yeah, Hurley's on the cover of the new Weezer album. That makes sense."
It was so great. I remember when Jorge Garcia was like, "Can you believe this is happening to me?" I'm like, "What?" It was so wild.
What was it like watching it while it was on? Because I did not watch it while it was happening. I do remember, obviously, those, like, big moments of being like, "Oh, yeah, I guess Lost is this big situation, like, people are obsessed with it," but
Mhm.
I didn't get into it for a while. So I'm curious what it was like to experience it while it was happening with such a big fandom and such a big excited group.
It was like the utmost of puzzle solving, because there would be like people would analyze every little thing that would happen in a scene. I remember the first time they showed the others and you just see their feet and this kid is dragging the teddy bear and people were like, "What's up with the teddy bear? Everybody look at the feet. What's going on with the feet? Did you see something in the background? How many adults were there?" It was just like constantly. And the creators of the show, Carlton Cuse and JJ Abrams, like leaned into that
Mm,
hardcore. Like they were so JJ Abrams was brought on because he had the idea. He pitched the idea and Damon Lindelof was going to be the showrunner, but Damon Lindelof, this was his first show. And
mhm.
ABC was like, "We cannot put a show that costs this much because the pilot was like so expensive in the hands of a newbie
Okay.
showrunner." So Carlton Cuse had been doing shows. He was a showrunner on Magnum PI, and they brought him on, and they were like, "You're going to basically be his babysitter." And so it became like this team, but they really worked very well together. And so, yeah, J.J. Abrams was an executive producer, but he wasn't there after season one. And he went on and did, all of his other bad robot stuff, which is when he probably started working on Star Trek. But
Yeah.
yeah, they were very big about like if there was a phone number on screen, it was a
Mhm.
real phone number. You could call it.
Oh, wow.
Um, if they never dropped websites, but yeah, phone numbers was a big thing. And I remember they had tapes that were like they started finding tapes in some of the locations. And if you figured out a certain puzzle, you could get online and watch the entire tape. And then you could find clues within that would give you clues to things that were going to happen later in the season or the next season.
Wow.
Yeah. So when
So
people
it was
talked about
completely
like they didn't know what they
interactive.
were doing, I was like, I really think they did. I was like, they knew where they wanted the story to go. They just didn't know how many episodes they had to get there. That
Sure.
was like the only thing.
They knew what they wanted to do, they just didn't necessarily do what you wanted them to do,
Right,
and that's
exactly.
okay. Yeah, I think that's amazing because anyone who knows me knows that I love a little interactive content. So
Really? I
I
hadn't figured that out.
I don't know if you've heard, but I love the idea of, like, it happening where it's that intense because it almost feels like that heightens your awareness watching the show in a
Mhm.
way that, nowadays, like, I absolutely find myself on my phone while I'm watching something. It's very bad, and I'm not giving attention to the things that I'm paying attention to in the way that I should be, but
Yeah.
I love shows that make me put my phone down, and that sounds like exactly what that would force you to do.
Yes. It was
Um
very much like, pay attention to every moment. Make sure you see this thing that's happening in the background. The Dharma Initiative, like, online was crazy.
Yeah.
Um, what did I there was something I think it was season 3 or season 4, I can't remember which one, but they're in one of the Dharma bunkers, and someone is listening to a record,
Okay.
and that song was released. They released a single of that song on Apple Music, and I have it. It's called Dharma Girl. And I remember that, like, it played in the episode, and then they released it. And I was just like, "This is crazy." Why it made me want to do that kind of world building where it's like, could you
Yeah.
imagine, like, putting this much effort into something outside of the television show when the television show already is, like,
Very
layer
good.
upon layer and
Yeah.
deep. Like, I don't know. It was
Yeah,
wild to me.
I love when it feels like someone has it is interesting too because I feel like the narrative of fans at a certain point got to like, "Well, they don't know what they're doing," but it sounds like it was such an intense level of craft that
Yeah.
they knew exactly what they were doing.
Right.
There's something that feels, like you're being taken care of almost as a viewer that
Mhm.
you're like, there's not only is there an ending, it's being so carefully put together.
Yeah.
Um, oh, that's fun. I like that. Did you feel like that perhaps helped build that community that you're talking about where you've had friends for 20 years? Like, were you meeting these people online because of the fact that you were all trying to solve a specific mystery?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And we would all talk about stuff and then talk about what we found and all that, and then, the conversations would go from there.
Mhm.
And once Lost was over, I knew that I was friends with these people because we didn't stop talking. It, like,
Mm.
became, "Okay, now what are we" it wasn't like, "Let's find another show." It's like, "Hey, we're just friends. Let's just be who we are." And then more shows came. Like, we ended up getting into Fringe after that, but
Mm. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
it's really cool to listen to you talk about it as it was happening because I watched it after. Like, so I didn't experience any of the, um, intense level of, like, waiting for next week's episode
Oh
or
my
waiting for
gosh.
the next
It was
season.
so crazy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like it was a huge thing.
And they were big about having things when they were off the air. So, like, in the
Mm.
summer, there was content.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
What
they
kind?
had,
Like
more of the Dharma videos or things you could find on websites. There were a couple of books released to that, and people were like, "Are there clues in the books? Let's read the books and see if there are clues in the books."
mm,
And stuff like that. Like, they just had stuff going on, and I'm trying to remember, there was a web series, and everybody was like, "Is it canon?" And they said it was canon, but you didn't have to see it because there were people who were
okay.
like, "Well, we're not gonna watch this because we don't know where to find it." And I think you had to have ABC, like, that was early in ABC's streaming. Like, you had
Okay.
to be able to watch it on ABC.com or something.
Okay.
And there were people who were like, "Oh, well, I can't watch that. I don't have the bandwidth or whatever." And I was
Whatever.
like, "I'm
Yeah.
totally watching everything. Gotta find it. Oh my god." And then, yeah, and so that's how we found out about the frozen donkey wheel, where everybody thought that the frozen donkey wheel was some kind of code, and then it was literally a frozen donkey wheel. And I swear that that was the moment where people were like, they don't know what they're talking about anymore.
They're like,
Frozen
they've
donkey wheel
lost it.
happened, and people were mad.
There's a literal frozen donkey wheel. It is no code. It's just here.
It's just a donkey wheel. It was so wild. And I was like, "Wait, what? It's an actual donkey wheel."
Did you have moments like, it sounds like you had an overall pretty positive, view of the show. Did you have
Yeah.
moments where you were mad about plot
Oh,
twists or something that
yeah.
happened?
Oh, I guess it's been off the air for long enough. Like, some people dying,
Yeah.
I was pissed about. I'm still mad about I'm really mad about the way they killed Charlie, and I understand that it was a sacrifice, but I'm totally the person who will poke holes if there's just a tiny hole, I will poke at it and make it bigger. He didn't have to be in the room. He did not have to close the door with him in the room. He could
Yeah.
have been on the other side of the door. That still pisses me off. When they come back to the island in the last season and Sun and Jin are drowning and
Mhm.
Sun is stuck and Jin is like, I have to stay here with you. All I can think is, you have a child.
Yeah.
You came back here to get your child's mother, yet you are going to die here. I was so pissed about that. And at that point, I had kids. So I was like really mad
Mm.
about it. And I was like, I
Mhm.
get it. I get it. She's the love of your life. I get it. But
You
she
have
wants you
kids,
to
yeah.
go because she knows that you have a child. Leave. Just leave. So I was really mad about that too.
So, okay, the one thing I am really curious about though is what was it about season 1 when you watched it straight through that made you go, "Never mind, this is actually really great."
I think the amount of what the hell moments
Mm.
were so high. I am always trying to figure out what's going on in a show.
Mhm.
And I am either, damn it, that was too easy, and I get pissed off at the show, or when I figure it out, I'm like, "Oh, well, I can see how that all connects." I could not at any point figure out what the hell was happening on Lost in that first season. I was like, "I don't know what this island is about. I don't know why there was a polar bear. What is this smoke monster that sounds like a train? What the hell is happening?" Like, I had no clue what was
Yeah.
happening, and that wasn't that prominent in the first episode. Like, you heard
Mm.
the sounds, you heard this, but it was really just a bunch of people who just crashed and were trying to figure things out. And I was like, this is supposed to be sci-fi. What's happening? Like, it just
So
didn't get me.
so you needed the hook of sort of like the sci-fi elements. The human drama was not as interesting without it to you.
Right. Yeah. And I know that I got to love the characters,
Sure.
but I still to this day don't think it's the strongest pilot
Mhm.
because there were so many characters to introduce. They
Yeah.
introduced at least 12 people in that 2-hour pilot,
Yeah,
and
they
that's a
really do.
lot.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I don't quite care yet. But when I started getting the flashbacks and getting to know them, then I
Mhm.
cared about them. And then I was like, okay, I'm with these characters because I'm definitely all about caring about a character.
Mhm.
Like, I can't just watch a show based completely on plot.
Yeah.
I just can't do it. I have to give a shit about the characters to some extent.
Yeah, I can't think of, like, a single show that I'm like, "Oh, yeah, like, the plot, it doesn't matter who you put in it, I'd be fine watching." Like, no, the characters are
Yeah.
almost always your emotional center of why you watch something.
Mhm.
So, it's interesting that, like, for you, you were like, "I don't care about these people, and unless you make something scary or sci-fi or give me a mystery, I refuse to learn about these people and care about them."
Yeah. And then I started caring, and then I just it didn't matter. Like, the sci-fi sort of fell off by the end of season 1. I was like, "Oh, okay. These characters matter to me. All right.
Yeah. So it's
Now
like,
I'm with them."
do you find that that's, like, what your taste is in general in media, that you need, like, something big first and then you connect to the characters? Or are you, like, do you love, Little Women?
Okay, look, I love Little Women.
I know, I picked the one thing that every person is like, "Well, I mean, actually."
But for real, but no, usually I'm really invested in the characters
Mm,
right off the bat. Like, if I don't get a handle on the characters, then I'm like, maybe.
yeah.
Maybe I'll come back to this. And I've done that with a lot of procedurals, and I know that's not the point of a procedural show is for me to care about the characters, but I've been watching SVU since it started, so I'm
I'm
gonna
sorry.
care about some characters.
Who watches SVU and doesn't care about Christopher
Exactly.
and
Yes. I
I'm
mean, come
sorry.
on. Come on.
Yeah, I'm curious about sort of like what your life was like when you started watching Lost, like when you really got into it, what was going on, where were you living? You said you had left you were not in your hometown anymore, not in the same state as your mom.
Right. Yeah, I was in grad school, when law started, and it was kind of this weird thing of being away from my normal friends, but I'd made some good friends in grad school, but
Mhm.
none of them seemed to be as into sci-fi as I was, and I was like, "I don't know about this. This is weird. Like, am I just gonna watch this show by myself?"
Mhm.
And really, my, like, years in grad school, I watched it by myself, and then when I started working, like, in the industry, I found
Mhm.
people who watched it. Like, my
Yeah.
first job was, working for Project Runway, and there were 2 women I worked with who loved Lost, and that, like, became our thing. Every week, we'd get to work and have to talk about Lost
No
before
one
we
saw
started
my
work.
physical reaction when you just said my first job was at Project Runway. I was obsessed with Project Runway as a kid. That was a big nugget of information for me. Um, well, one of the one of the things that you did say though is that you were in grad school and nobody was really into sci-fi, and I am very curious about that because I had a very similar experience at film school where it was like I love these genre things and people sort of just didn't. It felt like there was like an intentional push away from that. Did you find that same thing? You were in grad school for film, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was a lot of people, if they did like genre, it was horror,
Mm,
and but even then, it wasn't a lot of them. They all wanted to make, like, Fellini films, and I'm like, "Look, people, I don't wanna do that." Like, I struggled my first year of grad school because I knew what kind of stuff I wanted to do,
mhm,
and that was not what other students in my class wanted to do. Like, I wanted to make very character-heavy things, and they were very much into, "How much plot can I put into this five-minute film?" And I'm just like, "No, why can't it just be 2 people in a room having a conversation?"
mhm.
And then if I wanna make it sci-fi, the 2 people in the room just happen to be monsters. Like, I don't it doesn't have to get huge.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be some big thing for you to, like, care. But, yes, it was very strange when I started school. I still have friends that I from grad school who are still my friends, but they were never we just didn't have the same film taste, and it was very strange.
Did you move into sort of sci-fi by the time you were leaving, or did you kind of put it on hold for grad school and come back to it later?
I actually developed a fear of it because I love it so much.
Mm,
I was kind of scared of doing it. Um, when I was deciding if I wanted to do Apollyon or not, which is something I started thinking about in 2003. In fact, I found my original notes for Apollyon, like, in a notebook I had from grad school. I was like, "Oh, crap, that's right. I started thinking about this story way earlier than this." And I was kind of scared to do it because I was like, "I love sci-fi and I love character, and I just don't know if I can pull it off." So
mm,
I was just like, "Nah, we're just gonna stick to slice of life stuff because that's what I know and that's what I can do." And so I pretty much stayed away from writing sci-fi stories up until I came back to Apollyon. So I wrote that script, I think my 2nd year in grad school, and then didn't do anything with it for, like,
mm.
years. And then I was like, "Oh, well, I don't want it to be a feature film anymore. Let's make it a podcast because that's the thing I do now."
I'm always so interested in kind of people's film school stories in terms of like when you are perhaps I don't wanna say not interested in, like, art house because I don't think that
Yeah.
that's the truth. Like, I certainly enjoy watching an A24 film or
Oh, yeah.
I'll watch every movie that's up for an Oscar. I love, awards films, right? I enjoy them. But I think it's interesting because I think people who enjoy genre and sci-fi and that type of storytelling can very easily jump over and say, "I also love this other stuff." But it seems like the reverse is not always the case,
Mhm.
especially when you're in film school, where it's like I definitely, for my undergrad experience, like, I was miserable the first first 2 years of college, and it was because, like, I was like, "Okay, so" I went to the movies by myself all the time,
Mhm.
um, to go see just to see what I like, to see the movies I wanted to see the new Avengers movies, to see the various, I can't even think of, like, the big things that I wanted to see now, but I know I genuinely spent, like, every weekend I would go to the movies by myself. Um, and I'm curious, like, do you see people growing out of that? Do you think that's like a young film school kind of thing, or do you think that is just it sticks around? There's like a distaste for it.
I think that's a young film school thing because I've noticed that I also taught film school for 9 years, so I saw it. I saw it a lot where I'm like, "Stop doing that. Just don't,"
Yeah.
because 'Cause they're trying to make the pretty thing,
Mhm.
and I'm not gonna say I didn't either because I was trying to make the pretty thing too, where we're so focused on how it's going to look and how someone's going to perceive it that we're not thinking about the story that we wanna tell, and I swear that that's something that was very hard to get across in film school, where they're trying to teach you all this technical stuff and show you all these beautiful films, and you're watching them all, and all you want to do is make that.
Mm,
Like, I remember seeing Road to Perdition and going, I want to make that. It is so
mhm,
gorgeous and so beautifully acted and just so wonderful to look at. And I was like, yeah, I want to make that. But not understanding that I wasn't in a position to make that movie. That wasn't a movie for me to make.
mm,
Like, being able to figure out what it was I needed to make. And that brings it back to Lost for me because, like, so many people were so pissed about how they ended that show. Like, so
mhm,
mad. Granted, I
yeah.
didn't think it was perfect, but you know what? Fine. That was how they ended it. Not everybody's gonna like it, and, I liked most of it.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, "Oh, wow," and they owned it. Like, they didn't back
Mhm,
away from it. They didn't try to say, "Well, we couldn't put all this storytelling." They were like, "Nope, that's the ending. That's what you got. That's what we were planning the whole time," and I was like, "Hell yeah." Like, "Okay, own that." And I'm like, "That's brilliant." Because they had nothing to hide behind because they had made that deal with ABC,
mhm,
because they got to the point where they're like, "We know what story we wanna tell. We need to know how many episodes we have," which was also a huge deal. Like, that didn't had happened before
mhm.
that I can think of, where the creators of a show can go to the network and say, "This is how many episodes we wanna make," and the network going, "Okay."
Yeah.
Like like, they
Sure.
knew how many episodes the last 3 seasons of the show were gonna be before they even made it. That's insane.
Yeah.
Like, and to
Y
really, like, own it like that, I'm like, "Yeah, that's the kind of storytelling I just wanna own it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. I'll deal."
So did you feel like that was a turning point for you in watching someone be able to have that much control over their work and be able to deal with people not liking it?
Oh, yeah. And it kinda got me obsessed with serialized storytelling.
Okay.
Before Lost, I wanna be a filmmaker. I wanna make films. I want to be on that stage winning the Oscar for best screenplay or best editor or whatever. And then after watching Lost, I was like, "Wait, why spend only an hour and a half or 2 hours with characters when I could spend 5 seasons with them?"
Mhm.
Like, why not? Because I definitely loved the characters on Lost more than I probably loved characters in movies.
So did you feel like that was the first TV show that made you feel that way, where you were like, "I need to be watching something every week?"
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
strange when I don't even consider it, like, my favorite show of all time, but it was the
Yeah.
first time where I was like, I have to see this. I have to know what's going on with these characters," where I was obsessing about it outside of the show, like, I never did that before.
Mm.
Like, Quantum Leap is just, like, in my head, like, I remember every single episode. I'm
Yeah.
watching the new show, I was really worried about it, I was like, "If anybody's gonna be skeptical about a show, it's me." And then I loved it because of how they are telling the story, and I'm
Mm.
seeing all the little nuggets in it, and people are like, "Oh, I didn't catch that," and I was like, "Oh, this happened in season 3 and episode 5 of Quantum Leap." I'm totally that person. But it's but, like, I never like, I'd watch Quantum Leap, enjoyed it, and then I'd move on. And I don't
Mhm.
know if it was an age thing because I was definitely younger when I watched Next Generation and Quantum Leap, and Lost was like, full-blown adult living on my own kind of thing. So I don't know if it was an age thing that made me more obsessed with it
Mhm.
or what it was, but yeah, that was the first time that I was like, television is important. Television stories are important. I have a whole friend group because of it. I probably got into
Yeah.
podcasting because of it.
Yeah.
Like, Lost did a lot for me.
And then you said the first time that you knew people in real life that watched Lost was when you had gotten your first job in the industry at
Yeah,
Project Runway. So
yeah.
how does that come up in conversation to find your sort of like nerd that's like, "I also love this show?"
Oh, it's a whole lot of, like, the amount of because we were all in post-production, so we're
Mm,
sitting in front of computers just going through reels. So it's like, "I've been staring at a computer for this long. It's lunchtime. Let's just talk." And
yeah.
so it just, like, happened at lunchtime where we would find out what shows we liked and what shows we didn't. And it was really funny because we all said that we didn't like reality television, but we liked Project Runway. It was like this weird thing of us not liking other reality shows, and I was like, "Oh, then what do you watch?" And then
Mhm.
people start talking about the things they watched, and then it was like, "Oh, Lost." We had Lost parties. We would, like
Oh,
we had a party for the finale.
okay.
We watched the finale all together, it was crazy. I had moved back home by that time, so it was like virtual party. Like we were just like, everybody's watching. We're watching right now, and so it was just like we were all watching together. It was crazy.
Oh, that's so fun. So you started out having friends online because of the show,
Yeah,
and then transitioned into real life friends that then after you spread out had to go into online friends
yeah,
while watching the
yeah.
show.
Mhm.
Oh, how lovely. I do really love I think TV, like you said, has the ability to keep you in for as long as you can, for years, essentially, and movies don't necessarily have the same
Mhm.
connective tissue because you get a beginning, middle, and end by the end of the movie. Um, when unless you're talking about large
Yeah.
franchises that kind of do the same thing. So, it's cool that the thing that sort of shifted you into being like television is really important as a form of storytelling was also the thing that had enough content for you to be able to build relationships with people over years and years and years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's such a strange thing to think that it not only affected the kind of storytelling I wanted to do, it also affected how I was
Mm,
telling stories because I did start to realize that there was another medium out there and realizing that podcasts were a thing
yeah.
and thinking and having the people in that group, in that forum who were podcasters, most of them became podcasters, being like, "Oh, you can do this. You can do it. Just go ahead and do it." And I'm like, "Okay."
Most of them were podcasters in like the rewatch podcast space, like of Lost.
They became that. Like,
Okay.
we all came together because of Ryan and Jen, and then Cliff and Stephanie, and then these people were like, "Oh, we made this community with Lost. What other shows can we do that with?" And they still do it. Like,
Wow.
watched The Flash for 2 seasons longer than I wanted to because I was in a group of people who were friends of mine from Lost days who were making a podcast, and I wanted to, like, be involved in that conversation.
Sure.
I don't love them that much anymore because I can't. Flash, I'm sorry. There's just I can't do it.
I watched it for a while. I did really enjoy the beginning of the show, and then it actually was more so that there was so much connected, like, you had to watch every show to
Yes.
be connected, and then the crossovers, there was just a lot going on, and I didn't have time to keep up with everything all at once. I think it's interesting because that's one of those shows that, like, as I was saying, I was like, "Oh, yeah, like, unless something's a really big interconnected franchise, there's nothing that can keep you in for as long as a TV show that does really well." But yeah, I think the sort of Berlanti verse of actually, I think it's technically called the Arrowverse, even though
Yeah,
Arrow's not on
Arrowverse,
anymore.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, Arrow was not for me just because it's not for me, not because it's bad or anything like that. It it doesn't scratch an itch for me, but
Mm.
he would show up in every show as he was the sort of like Tony Stark of that connective
Yeah, yeah.
tissue or the Agent Coulson, but I was like, "I don't know who this man is." Every time he arrives. What could he have to say that could be important?
Right, I only yeah, I would watch when they would do the crossover episodes, I'd watch all the other ones,
Mm,
but I was really, like, only a Flash person,
yeah.
and then Flash just got off the rails. I don't even know what happened, but I was like, I don't care anymore. I
I
just
think I
don't
stopped
care."
keeping up with it after the Flashpoint season
Oh, which
is
was
when
a good season.
I liked that, but then I think there was a certain point where, like, the timelines got too confusing for me, and I was like, I actually don't know what has happened that is still happen like, still counted, it still
Yeah.
happened, and
Yeah.
what's new. So that was where I was like, "I think I'll come back to it," and I have yet to do so,
Yeah.
but it is really cool that you started, like, kind of finding other shows to keep a community around after Lost ended, so
Oh,
it was
yeah.
almost like you guys were still craving that connective,
Mhm.
connective identity. So would you say you watched more shows that you wouldn't have watched because of sort of your friends and where they were going post Lost?
Somewhat, yeah, and we all discovered shows together kind of a thing, probably Terra Nova was one of those shows that
Mhm.
probably none of us were going to watch alone, but we all talked about it and thought, "Hey, this will be cool," and it only lasted 1 season, and we were all sad, but, like I said, we were really just, 10 people watching this show. That was considered the most expensive pilot that Fox had ever purchased.
Was it really?
Yeah, and if you can find it, watch this pilot because it is a full-on 2-hour, like, Jurassic Park-esque movie. It is insane.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And you could
I'm
honestly
all
just watch the pilot and be like, "Oh, I watched a
and be
movie, it's
satisfied.
fine." Like, I don't have to watch the rest.
Yeah,
It's wild.
I feel like there are so many sci-fi gems like that where it's like for some reason nobody ever watched them, but they were really good.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
did you watch Warehouse 13?
I
I feel
did.
like yeah, that's one
I
of
loved
those.
it.
Oh, a
Yes.
good show. No one
Yeah, I got
watched
my
it.
children into that too. They loved Warehouse 13
Oh,
and
yeah?
Eureka.
Oh, I did not see Eureka.
You didn't? Oh, they are in the
No.
same universe. You should
Oh,
totally
are
check
they?
out Eureka.
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
have to check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eureka's a lot of fun.
Um, yeah, I think Warehouse 13 actually was and they don't do this anymore, and they should. I don't know if you remember when iTunes used to give away the first episode of shows to get you to watch them.
Yes.
That
Yes.
was one of those that I was like, "What's this?" And I was a teenager, so I would download and I was obsessed with television, so I would just download everything that they offered you. And that's how I ended up watching a ton of shows that ultimately only had 1 season because that's why they were giving it away. 'Cause there was this, like, British, supernaturally show. Like, it was, set at a college, at a university. Now I this one I really will not be able to bring from the depths of the internet. I'm not gonna remember the name of it. I bet you I could bring it from the depths of my iTunes account. It was really good. I remember being like, "Oh, I can't wait to find out what happens next," and they were like, "You're never gonna." I was like, "Great. Thank you so much."
Yeah. The worst
Um,
feeling, the worst feeling.
yeah,
And I
no
do
good.
remember, okay, I think the interesting thing is that people talk about other shows that were on during the time that Lost was on.
Mhm.
I don't know them because
Mm.
if I couldn't record the show, I wasn't gonna see it because
Oh,
I'm like,
because it was
"Lost is
on when
on."
Lost was on.
I was like, "Lost is on. I'm not seeing that show." And I remember doing that as a kid too. Quantum Leap came on. It aired almost every night of the week. Like,
Okay.
NBC kept moving it around, and I remember being so annoyed because I was like, "Just find a night and keep it on that night." And there was another show, Sequest,
Mhm.
with, Jonathan Brandis that I was obsessed with, and then Sequest and Quantum Leap came on opposite each other, and I had to make a decision. And I chose Quantum Leap. And now to think that my kids don't even have to worry about that, like, they don't have to make that decision, they can just watch
Yeah, there's no concern
everything.
whatsoever.
I
Do you
was like,
miss
"That's
that type
crazy."
of television viewing where it was like everybody had to be in front of the television at the same time?
I do sometimes, yeah, because it's like again, like you said, like, we're doing 1,000 other things while we're watching a show because probably in the back of our minds, we know if we miss something, we can rewind it, or we can just
Mm,
watch it later. But the idea of, like, if I don't see it now, I'm not seeing it.
yeah.
Like, that I have to be sitting here. I was definitely the kid on Saturday mornings who would turn on the TV, and then during the commercial, how fast can I go get my cereal, can do all this stuff, and be back in front of the TV before the show comes back? Like, I would do that during Lost. It was like, "Oh, no,
Yeah.
we gotta make dinner before Lost starts because I'm not even gonna get up during commercials, because if I do, I
Yeah.
might miss something." So or a commercial could have something to do with Lost, which they did one season where the commercials there was something in a commercial, like an ABC commercial that had a clue about Lost. I don't remember what that was, but it was
Wow.
crazy, and I was just like, "I can't believe I missed a commercial because I remember missing it, and somebody's like, "Did you guys see the commercial?" And I was like, "What?" It was some, like, wild thing, yeah.
Yeah, I miss it sometimes too because I think, like, I miss feeling attentive in watching television, and it's my own fault, I think, like but I think we all do it now, and
Yeah.
I actually distinctly remember the first time, I actually I wanna say it was actually Teen Wolf, but I'm not positive now, I just remember the viewing experience of when they started putting the hashtag of what to tweet with on screen during
Oh,
the
yeah.
show. Um, and that, like, started the need of I was so used to watching TV and then after the episode going online and interacting with people about it or
Mhm.
texting my friends or whatever. But I remember when they put it was like a, like a lower thirds, like, on the
Yeah,
television
yeah.
program, like, next to, like, the MTV logo, it said, like, "Use hashtag Teen Wolf" or whatever it was. I wanna say it was Teen Wolf, and now I'm uncertain. I don't wanna blame Teen Wolf for for my experience, but yeah, I remember, like, the first time I saw, like, a hashtag to use, and then you, like, went on and live tweeting became such a thing that you were interacting with the sort of other people watching it and the stars of the show sometimes
Yeah.
while the show was airing, which then I feel like started to build this experience of it's okay to be doing something else while like, you're actively being encouraged to be online while you're watching the show as opposed to after, and
Yeah.
then it's just expanded from there that I'm like, now I'm on Twitter or I'm on the internet or I'm texting or I'm checking something various of it's so rare that I fully just put my phone down for 45 minutes and watch an episode.
Yeah. And I think that's what was interesting about being on a forum with Lost is because that forum wasn't on my phone. I also
Mm,
didn't have the data to, you
mhm,
know, be on my phone the whole time. So you'd watch the
sure.
show, be in the show, try to remember things from the show, and then go talk to people about it. Like I would just like watch the show and then go to my computer. So it was like if I had had the ability, yeah, if I had the ability to have the forum in front of me, I probably would have been like live conversations about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something I do love the experience of, like, watching TV with people, like, you mentioned the Teen Wolf movie, I'm actually having people over to watch the Teen Wolf movie
Yay.
together, which I'm very excited about because I really miss that feeling all the time of, like, s being able to all go, like, while
Right,
it
right.
happens, you know?
It's so much fun. It's so much
Um
fun.
Yeah. Did you well, so you mentioned earlier, like, very passingly that your husband knew to leave you alone
Yeah.
on Tuesday nights. Did you ever, like, let him watch with you, or was that fully you were like, "Nobody touch me. I'm closing the door. This is for
Oh, no,
me."
he watched, but he wasn't as obsessed as I was. Like,
Okay.
he knows that I am the nerd level that he will never be. And but I'm like, "You have sports, I
Mhm.
have TV, so it's fine. We're fine. Like, you can name every player on a team, and I wouldn't be able to do that ever. But I can tell you the actors who were in the last 5 seasons of this and what show they were gonna be in next. Like, I can I can definitely do that.
And I can follow them to the ends of the earth, and that's how it works.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, that's so funny. I just had, like, a vision of you sitting your husband down and being like, "So, honey, you know how trade deadlines work. This is how when this actor moves to this show, it's because" yeah, no, that's very I enjoy that. I like the sort of role reversal of comparing it to sports because it almost does sort of feel that way, like, as we
Yeah.
were talking through, we were like, "Oh, well, this showrunner was coming from this show and knew how to had this skill," and, like, when you
Yes.
put them together
Yeah, it's like it's wild. It's wild to
yeah, it's
think
like you
like
could
that.
build your own fantasy showrunner league, like
Oh, I could. Ooh.
right?
And I would say that, I don't know, maybe I'm on the industry side of things, so I think it's weird because I probably think about TV shows differently than other people. Because I know showrunners and have known showrunners for a while, like, I know the names of showrunners, but I feel like with Lost, that was the first time lay people knew the
Mm,
names Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse. Like,
I agree with that.
they and probably could recognize them. If they saw them walking down the street, they would even know who they were because they were very public facing. Like, they
Yeah.
would do podcasts and they would do interviews and they would talk about the show, and you really just didn't see that. Like, I have no idea what Dick Wolf looks like. That man has been working for, like, 40 some odd years. I don't know what he looks like. Like
Yeah, and it's interesting too because they're names that I think lay people still know, like,
Yeah.
people have followed through, and I would definitely agree with you that it was definitely one of the first times that that became a well-aware thing because now I know writers' names and showrunners' names because I care because that's what I wanna do and that's what I'm I involved in, so
Mhm.
it makes sense to me now, but Lost was on the air I think it ended in 2010
Yeah.
ish,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I was when it started, I was in, like, elementary school. So I think I it ended right when I was going into high school, like, around high school era
Mhm.
time. And I knew J.J. Abrams's name at that point when I had no interest in working in television or being
Yeah.
involved or anything like that. Um, and I remember because I actually, like, vividly remember in the high school bathroom, there was like, it must have been, like, a TV club or something, but there was basically, like, a Q&A that they were all gonna log into to watch J.J. Abrams, Damon Lindelof, and Carlton Cuse talk, and I remember seeing, like, the poster for it in the bathroom stall and being like, "I don't watch that show, but that's probably cool." Like, how good for them.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but I do think it's interesting because it seems like it's the type of show that feels almost like once in a lifetime that breaks through in such a big way where so
Yeah.
many people care about it. Yeah, I do think that those shows were like building this kind of relationship for you. It sounds like where it was not only like everybody really cared about it. There was like a big moment sort of in the culture, so to speak,
Mhm.
of everyone paying attention. And then it's also building you a mystery where they're intentionally telling you they're leaving you clues.
Yeah.
And then to some degree, those creators are then saying, also, here's my face. And I will go on a podcast and talk about this show. I will give this interview and talk about this and like answer your questions and own what I've done. And I don't know how often that happens where you actually start to build that relationship with the creative team in a way that like everyone knows who they are.
Yeah. I also think that them being so public facing, made it almost, I guess, universally understood, don't leak anything, don't
Mm,
spoil anything. Like, I could have watched Lost the next day and not been spoiled by it because I
mm,
swear that everybody who watched the show would just be quiet for like 3
wow.
days. They were like, "It's too important. It's too much to, like, spoil it for you because you should see the whole episode." Because it's
Yeah.
like, if I spoil this one story point, it'll just ruin the whole episode for you, so you need to see this whole episode, and they wouldn't talk about it. Like, people just wouldn't spoil Lost. I don't remember ever seeing episodes leaked or anything like that. Like, we would get stills like, "Oh, here's this thing happening. Here's" like, the
Mhm.
frozen donkey wheel thing, they revealed on a podcast. They're like, "This season, just think about a frozen donkey wheel." They literally said it, and people were the whole season were like, "What the hell? What the hell? What the hell?"
Oh
It was
my
just
goodness.
crazy.
Yeah. Did you feel like one of the things that you mentioned is like it was one of the first times that it made you shift what type of content you wanted to make
Mhm.
and like what type of television you wanted to make. Did you feel like having that relationship and that accessibility to the showrunner and the creators of the show was something that helped change that view of like what type of relationship you wanted to have with your audience?
Yeah. It was the first time that I understood how important writers were in the television realm. Like,
Mm,
I already knew from film school that screenwriters are sell the story and move on. Unless you're
yeah.
some uber famous screenwriter who can have a say in what happens to your story, you write the thing, you sell it, and then that's it. You have to move on to your next thing. And then when I started watching Lost and really saw that they were in the writers' room and that the writers were collaborative and that, you got to write the show and you had to break a season and they had a story bible that was
Mhm.
like, the thickest thing I've ever seen. I'm just like, this is wild to sit there and not just create characters, but create an entire universe. It made me think about Tolkien writing Lord of the Rings.
Mm.
Just short of creating a language, they're basically creating this entire world, and who knows if we even saw everything that they created in that. Like, I bet there are things that never made it to screen
Mhm.
that they had in that. They had backstories for every single main character, probably knew how they were gonna die, all of this stuff, and just the idea of, like, being that in control of storytelling and being
Yeah.
able to have a say in it past writing it. I
Mhm.
was just like, TV is just I think that's it, that's the way to go, and them talking about it and how they run and process a room was definitely very appealing to me and kind of made me think, "Oh, well, film's cool, but TV's awesome. I wanna be a TV writer."
And then you did move into TV and moved into that space
Yeah,
sort of, so
yeah,
that's and it's still to this day you're doing episodic content,
yeah,
so it did sorta strike a nerve, it
right,
sounds
yeah,
like.
yeah. I think about making film again, and I'm like, "I don't know if I can do." I'm like, "Can I do, like, 3-act storytelling anymore? I don't even know."
Can you be done that fast?
Oh, wow. Ooh.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, okay, well, I actually think that's a perfect transition into the question I always end on, which is, if you had never watched Lost, what would it be different about you today?
Um, we probably wouldn't be talking. I really think that if I hadn't watched Lost, I would not have gotten interested in serialized storytelling. I would have not really I would have been a passive listener of podcasts instead of being involved in them.
Mhm.
I just wouldn't be at this point in my career without Lost.
Yeah. The 3 big things I've heard you talk about today in terms of, like, what loss brought into your life are sort of, like, the relationships that you made in terms of forums and in terms of some in-person connections that you've made with people,
Mhm.
so, like, friendships and formed through, a love of content. The sort of understanding and excitement of how you could tell a story forever, almost like in an unlimited way, but also understanding like this is how the story is supposed to end and we're ending it and knowing that you have that, right? And then
Yeah.
also the connection with the creators themselves and understanding what the role of that specific type of person is. Do you feel like those are kind of what I've heard you talk about?
Yeah,
Um
for sure, like, finding I've wanted to be a writer since I was 5 years old,
mhm.
and it has traveled through being a novelist and being a poet that lasted for 2 minutes, and then wanting to be a playwright, and then settling on screenwriting and really thinking, "This is the career I want, this is what I want," and it was kind of this big moment in my life to find people who were invested in these characters, who wanted to be friends outside of just discussing these characters, and I think since it wasn't just, "Oh, we're blindly talking anonymous talk about this show that we love," like, we really got to know each other, and
Mhm.
to think that that's something television can do, that television can really bring people together and make friendships happen, I was like,
Mhm.
"Wait, I wanna do that." Like, I wanna be a person who does that. Like, I mean, there are people who are like, "Oh, you're deep in your career, you can't have a change, blah, 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 blah," and I was like, "You know what? I could have my first show at, like, 50." Alan Rickman was, like, in Die Hard when he was in his 50s. It's fine. So,
I love it,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I also love the sentiment that there's really not it's never too late to change your mind or do something new. It's
Mhm.
sort of just a pivot, and I think, like, we get so caught up in this idea that by 18, you should know exactly what you wanna do with your life and never change your mind.
Right.
And that's wild and absurd and not helpful, and so
No.
I think that's um a very genuine and, like, nice thing that we should be saying more often, which is, like, if something new is scratching that itch, it doesn't matter how old you are, you
Right,
can
yeah.
change your mind.
Do the thing. Do the thing.
Yeah.
Create more.
Well, oh, yes, create more. Create as much as you want, and even if that scratch itch of something is not being creative, I think that's the other thing, like, I
Mhm.
wish more people were saying things along the lines of, like, yeah, like, you don't have to have it all figured out ever, it just doesn't ever necessarily exist in that way, but 2, like, you might wake up one day and Faith, you might be like, "I'm a lawyer now," and
Yeah.
that's okay, like
It's
I don't know
fine.
that that's gonna happen, but
It would never. But, I mean, I always tell people it's wild because I'm very good at math. Like,
Mm,
I took advanced physics classes and stuff in high school, and I did at some point in time want to go into quantum physics and work in aerospace and work for NASA.
mhm.
And it's so strange to be like, I still have those interests. Maybe one day I'll be like, I'm done writing.
Sure.
Let's go
Yeah,
do
send us to
aeronautics.
space. Yeah. I and that's the thing is I think, like, obviously, there are steps that have to be taken to do that, but I
Right.
think it would be I think we should more often remember that that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
you wanna make those tomorrow? You wanna be an aerospace engineer and send us to Saturn? You do that,
Yeah.
and you should. I think it's great. Create more, but follow your heart.
Yes.
Follow your passions.
Yes.
Um,
And be passionate. Like, don't be afraid to be passionate about the things you love.
yeah, agreed. Well, I think that's a very heartwarming ending, so I'm glad we got there, and I really
Yeah.
appreciate you joining me today.
It was so much fun. I love talking about nerd stuff.
Same, and that is what it is to do to be here, so I'm so glad you were able to join us. Well, thank you again for joining me, Faith, and thank you everyone else for listening. We will be back next Wednesday with another guest. Between now and next Wednesday, if you want to keep in touch, you can follow me on social media at Marissa Kamari, anywhere you get your social media fix. You can also sign up for my newsletter by going to our website, tandonproductions.com, clicking on You Are What You Love, and signing up there. I send out an issue with every episode of this podcast. And we just started a Discord server, so if you want to connect with me, with other listeners, and talk about the types of things that we are talking about on this show, you can join that by clicking on the link in the episode description. Until next Wednesday, I hope you are enjoying what you love.